August is Women's Month, and last week South Africa commemorated Women's Day in honour of 20,000 women who marched to the Union buildings in 1956 to demonstrate against the extension of past laws. The President of Cosatu has written an op-ed saying that South Africa needs to rededicate itself to the full emancipation and empowerment of women. We're joined by Cosatu President Zingiswa Losi. Ms. Losi, thank you for being with us. You say that there have been some successes, but gender-based violence is endemic. We fear for our daughters' safety as they travel to school and university. That's what you say, and I concur fully. Isn't that the main issue here? That how can we talk about anything until women feel safe in this country?
Good evening, and thank you for having me, and greetings to the viewers. Indeed, it is a pandemic and endemic that we are dealing with as a nation. We are saying as a federation that we think we have tried in many fronts, particularly on the legislation front, to ensure that we have legislation that is supposed to be helping us in addressing these issues. But what we see at most is that the legislation on its own, without properly trained public servants who are expected to then implement these laws, if they lack training, if they lack capacitation, and if the public also does not understand their rights and what the law says, then this challenge that we are battling with continues. And we think that with what we have achieved as a country, fighting gender-based violence, sexual harassment and femicide is a societal issue, and therefore it is not them and us. It is an issue that we should be educating ourselves around, but ensure that each and every citizen understand what the law says, and also particularly those that are expected to implement this law are well versed with it and know how to enforce it.
So I think maybe because the violence has been so rife and the focus has been on the negative, I remember that many people lauded the promulgation of some of the laws in 2021, and you've spoken about them, the Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Act. Just tell us about some of the legislation that has been passed and how it should work. Some of it strengthens the power of the police, but you're saying that they're not always understanding what their powers are. Am I correct?
Indeed. The sexual offences and related matters, that it's a Domestic Violence Amendment Act that was amended in 2021, gives those that have authority to implement. Firstly, let me say that it protects the most vulnerable in our country. Children, women, and the most vulnerable from sexual harassment and violence in the world of work and also in our communities. But also it further says that those that are found guilty of sexual offences, they should not be employed in positions of authority. For an example, if you have an educator, a teacher that is found guilty of sexual offence, that person should not be standing in front of our children teaching them, because then you are subjecting these kids to this person that has been found guilty of such offences. But it also says that in any position of power, such people should not be employed on positions of authority, because what we've seen is that the perpetration of sexual offences, it is when there is power play, when there are those that have the power and they use that power against the most vulnerable that are reporting under them. It also gives authority and it increases the power of the police to intervene in suspected cases of gender-based violence and homicide. So what we are raising here is that as much as we have these, do we have the police force in our country that understands these laws? Do we have the social workers in our country that understands these laws? Do we have those that are expected to enforce these laws? Do they understand them? When a victim of sexual violence goes to a police station, the first person that she arrives at is a police officer, male or female. Are they aware of their responsibilities and the powers that are vested in them in terms of this? But also, the employers in the workplaces, are they aware of these, so that when those that have been convicted of such crimes do not be employed in positions of authority?
Yeah.
Hence, I'm saying that we strongly believe that we need to have more conversation around these laws, but also importantly, we need to ensure that everyone gets capacitated around them.
Yeah, we've heard of women being turned away from police stations, but we also need to monitor the implementation, like you say, and obviously there are people doing great work out there. We're running out of time. The theme, you say, focusing on achieving gender equality by 2030, and there have been strides. If you look at the National Assembly, it's something that the ANC has always pushed in terms of female representation, but so many gaps. I mean, is this possible by 2030?
It is possible if we have the political will. And I think it's going to take all political parties. It is going to take even ourselves in the trade union movement, in civil society, in business, that we must be conscious of the reality and the fact that we are not moving from the equal footing as men and women. We must accept that men have been advantageous in the past, that men have been able to move miles ahead of women on the basis of the laws that were there in the past, but also because of patriarchy that still exists in society now, and also that the workplaces have been workplaces that were meant for men to thrive. Now that women are here in the labor market and in many other areas of authority, it must be the conscience of men, the political will, for us to be able to say that for us to implement equality, we must also understand that we must have the quotas to ensure that women are given that advantage that will enable us to meet the 2030 targets that we have. Otherwise, out of grace, it is not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to take males and females, particularly males, to say, indeed, we have been privileged by the previous laws. We are conscious of how we should move forward and create that space.